Yemi Adamolekun is a social activist and the executive director Enough is Enough Nigeria, a coalition of advocates for public accountability and good governance in Nigeria. I need to put you on the spot. Compare this administration with the previous in terms of security and corruption.
Well, the popular joke is that APC and PDP are 6 and half a dozen.
Right.
So if you start from that premise, I would probably say not much difference in terms of public perception. And I'll say, so let's start with corruption. So this administration came in with a clear mandate that they gave themselves to fight corruption. And that was part of their campaign promises against the Jonathan administration. There's a bunch of commissions. There's a Presidential Advisory Committee on Commission. There's the EFCC chairman who they've refused to change because they believe he's fighting corruption. There's the talk around fighting corruption. But in the last month, something very interesting has happened. The APC government released a looters list that was full of PDP members, and PDP responded in kind by releasing a looters list that was full of APC members. Now, what's very interesting is that a lot of the members were cross-carpeted.
Right.
So it then makes you wonder who really is who's the accused and who's the accuser. But I think for me, what's more disturbing about this administration is what seems like lip service. Now, they've done a bit in terms of the judiciary. And so there's the Administrative Justice Act, which in a sense fast-tracks judicial proceedings around corruption. But then you have a lot of people who have been charged, but really no high-profile person has been prosecuted. Now, there's also the perception under the Jonathan administration that, in a sense, everybody was looting. So it was like a free-for-all. And as Vice President Oshibajo has been saying repeatedly over the last few weeks, is that, oh, if you see the quantum of money that had been stolen, how much had been wasted. But under this administration, yes, you might not see those large figures. But then there's the sort of seemingly turning the other cheek, if I want to use that word. So, in summary, I would say for a citizen, you don't see a government that's matching actions with words in ways that people feel that this is a country where corruption is not tolerated, where corruption is not, because where corruption is a no-go area, so to speak. And I think in that regard, I would say they're similar but different. Similar in the fact that for a Nigerian citizen, if you're in public office, you're still shielded from being prosecuted for corruption. But the talk around fighting corruption is very different, because the Jonathan administration didn't make any claims that they were fighting corruption. But this administration does talk about it.
Some people have argued that you're one of the civil society leaders that pushed for the emergence of this administration. From Twitter, I'm sure you've seen some people attack Enough is Enough about that, against the Jonathan government. Are you guilty of this accusation?
I'm guilty of charging the Jonathan administration with bad governance. So if that equated to campaigning for Buhari, that's how you want to see it, that's your headache, quite frankly. But if you accuse me of accusing the Jonathan administration of bad governance, without a shadow of doubt.
Interesting. I like the feedback. But last year, you said that you were disappointed by the performance of Buhari. How do you rate the administration now? Where has the administration failed specifically for you?
So, now if you follow on from your last conversation, so Jonathan administration, big, at least for us, we're big around bad governance. So Buhari administration campaigns around, we will do security, we'll do economy, we'll fight corruption. And for a lot of Nigerians who worked on the campaign, the expectations were very high around what President Buhari spoke about, what the perception of what he stood for. His vice president, a pastor, an academic, a very warm person that even today, if he walks into a room, everybody sort of takes to him because he's a warm person. So the expectations were high. But first of all, we wait for 6 months or odd to actually have a cabinet. In that time, people expected APC to hit the ground running. And not only running in terms of the people that you have working with you, but also running in terms of ideas. And then you have a president who suddenly said, well, all those campaign promises, I was not aware of it, and I didn't promise it. Then first of all, you're like, okay. And then he gets sick. You're fine, anybody can fall sick. But at what point do you say, my body is unable to do the work that this running a country, this, not necessarily this complicated, but with a lot of interest, am I able to do this work? So you're gone for, at this point, I don't even remember the number of months that he was away for. And then you come back. And then you are here, but not really here. And so the sort of moral leadership that people expected from this administration, nowhere in existence. Now, people talk about President Buhari's integrity, that he himself is a man of integrity and is a man who means well, but it's the people he surrounds himself with. In that statement alone, I believe you've indicted President Buhari, because you don't surround yourself with robots. You make the choice of who you want to support you. So the people you appointed as ministers are your choice. The people you appointed as head of parastatals, which has taken almost I think some parastatals still don't even have chairman. So it's taking you this long to put people in place. You've put people in place who others are saying are making you look bad, but yet you've done nothing about it. All of that for me points to a failure of leadership, or you don't really care, if I want to use that word. Take the Minister of Women Affairs. On camera is caught saying that a man in another party is her leader. Now, yes, you can say that we can have an inclusive government or people from different parties working, but I'm sorry, that's not how Nigeria works. If you're saying someone who's now come out now to run, who was challenging you for the office of the president is my leader, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're doing in government. And then you have an Inspector General of Police, who yourself, it wasn't a closed meeting conversation, it wasn't somebody overheard. You said publicly in March that you sent him somewhere in January, and you're just finding out in March that he didn't go, and nothing happens. And not only that, when people were suspecting a suspension and made claims around that, the Inspector General of Police himself said no such thing, and basically said, I dare anybody to suspend him. He's still Inspector General of Police. So I use those examples to say that expectations were high, but President Buhari, without a shadow of doubt, has fallen far, far short of those expectations. And then for me, I would now use two things in terms of Nigerians and Nigerian life. So there are a lot you can say about economy, about the corruption. But a president that does not care about the lives of his citizens, for me, when you start with that, that's a problem. So from the IG of police and the killings in Benue, to responses from Gaddafi to unknown people, but yet nobody is being prosecuted, nothing is happening. And you're a president of Nigeria, not of a section of Nigeria, number one. Number two, Bring Back Our Girls, which is very dear to me. So yes, El Zazaki, his followers were upset. You've held the man since December of 2015. You haven't charged him with anything. Well, finally charged him with murder. And they've been protesting that release him because we are not sure he's even still alive, for the sake of argument. So yes, you are worried about security in Abuja. Not a problem. I can understand that. But then you take out your worry about what the Shiite movement might do against Bring Back Our Girls by tear gassing people who have sat under a tree for 4 years and have done nothing. Yes, we protested on occasion, we've engaged on it, we've met you twice. But yet you think tear gassing a group of 10 people. I mean, today I was outside, we counted, there were at least 43 people, police officers outside. And those were the people I could see. There were some in cars that we could not see. So you send 43 people to guard a group of 10 people. And that is, in a country that's dealing with insurgency all over the place, that's the best use of your security forces. So when citizens can even not gather freely, as our constitution allows, yeah, problems.
I think that also takes me to the next question. This current government, they've boasted a lot about fights against corruption and Boko Haram, rescuing especially the Dapchi girls. We all watched on television where the terrorists rescued the girls, brought them back to the Dapchi community and walked away.
Oh, they had time to talk, actually.
Exactly. No, actually, the story is that they prayed at some point. They had a sermon.
And they, yes, preached to them.
Exactly, they preached to them and all that. How does that sit with you as a frontline leader of Bring Back Our Girls?
I think what is clear, both under the Jonathan administration and the Buhari administration, is there are a lot of lies. Right. And the lies, like when you lie, you have to lie to cover the previous lie. So now the Dapchi girls were released based on negotiation, but they kept one because she refused to denounce her faith. Fine. Chibok girls, mostly Christians, some converted, but when they came out, I mean, their welcoming sort of party was a Christian service, for lack of a better word. And even Shekau issued a video after that saying all the girls that he worked hard converting, all of them have now become Christians. But that's not the conversation. You allow them to come back because you negotiated that they release them and you'll give them free passage to come in and go. I can even say, for the sake of argument, since it's a negotiation, I understand that. But where were you after that was done to sort of immediately counter what had happened and provide context for the people in Dapchi around what this was about? Now you have parents who are telling you that they're not sending their children to school because it's really not worth the life of my child. Can you blame a parent? No. But the data, and we've tried to do some work on it, from the Northeast, the government in the North, and this is not federal because primary and secondary are on the purview of the state government, they are unwilling to share enrollment data because it shows just how appallingly low it is. But nobody is talking about it. So 20 years from now, who would be in positions of authority from those spaces? We're not talking and we're watching as if nothing is happening. But there's a fundamental problem around when people are taken from a community and when they are returned, and there's no conversation around what did they go through, debriefing, what do we learn from it. We're talking about it now. The military just announced that they rescued, quote unquote, and I use quote unquote deliberately, 1,000 people, very nice round number, from a community in Bama local government. Fair enough. But since that announcement yesterday, they've said nothing. There are no pictures, there's nothing. I checked on their Twitter timeline this afternoon. They're retweeting other people, tweeting praise, retweeting CNN, I believe, I'm not mistaken, but they provided no other data. As part of the outcomes of Bring Back Our Girls, we started work on a register of missing persons in Nigeria. We started working with the National Human Rights Commission. The federal government has now taken it over. It's sort of stalled as we fine-tune the process, but how can you say someone has returned when you don't know that the person was missing in the first place? This is a government that says we've decimated Boko Haram. So the Boko Haram that kept 1,000 people, kept them where? In the air? On what piece of land did they keep 1,000 people? And this is 1,000 that we know. So I'm saying all of this to say that the inconsistency in that we've decimated Boko Haram to communities saying Boko Haram still has patches of land. As someone was saying, the Shehu of Bama, I think if I'm not mistaken, hasn't returned. He's still in Maiduguri because he says nobody can tell him Bama is safe. So if the traditional rule of a local government is not returning, what does that tell you? And the government's unwillingness to be, I mean, you can't tell me you rescued 100 and something people and you can't give me names. Where were they from? Who are their husbands, their wives, their children, their siblings? Let us be able to say we rescued X from Y and we reunited them. You make a big song and dance about Chibok and we can understand the resentment. But we say to people for Chibok it's a bit easier because you have a community, you have names, you have family members, so you know where they're from. So we're saying do the same for other Nigerians. 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, we created what we call VAS, verification, authentication and reunification system, so that when people are brought back, you can say they were taken from A. But if you don't have a record of who's missing, how do you know who came back? And then you mix that with people from Chad, people from Niger, and where do you start and where do you stop? But the government just refuses to do anything.
There's a lot of clamor against the return of President Muhammadu Buhari for 2019. There's a third force. Are you a member of the third force?
Am I a member of the third force? Not officially, because why I say that is there's NIM, the movement, there's President Obasanjo's movement, there's Red Card movement, so there are a lot of movements.
Are you a part of all the movements you just mentioned?
I'm a part of the citizens, which basically says, look, APC and PDP in 20 odd years have developed suboptimal levels of governance. It is time for citizens to say what we want. So we talk a lot about what we don't want. We don't want corruption, but we want a leader who is X, Y, Z. We need to articulate that clearly and ensure that at every level, we're asking questions around what are you bringing to the table, and this is what we want, and this is what we want to see. So that's the third first that I'm a part of.
Interesting. back to the Obi Ezekwesili-led Red Card movement, which you're also part of. We'll break it down later. Some people are saying that it's ridiculous and impracticable in terms of winning elections. What do you say?
I say because we're used to being very powerless. Because at the end of the day, I use these numbers and I love using them. Ambode in Lagos State, Governor Ambode won by 120,000 odd votes. Lagos has, if I'm not mistaken, 5 million odd registered voters, or 7 million odd registered voters. At the federal level, President Buhari won by 2.5 million votes. Now, between April and December of last year, INEC has registered almost 4 million new voters. That gives you a sense of where we are with numbers. But if your starting premise is we cannot do it, then you won't do it. What does it cost you to say that these people have failed? I am then going to use my brain, my time, my resources to find people that reflect who I am and what I want. Why is that so hard? But if you start with it's impractical, well, then you do nothing. And then you spend time on Twitter whining about how useless they are. But I don't have time for such.
Oh, well, some people will say that you have been less critical of this administration. Can you tell us how you have resisted this government excesses so far?
We've been less critical. Possibly, yes, in honesty. And I'll take that. And I think it's for a variety of reasons. For example, for the whole of last year.
Are you tired?
Not tired. For most of last year, I was involved in a car hit me on the road. So I was out of work for maybe 7-8 months. So if I didn't speak for last year, yes, I didn't, because I was fighting for my life. I would accept that. I would also accept that because also as a team, as an organization, we've evolved a bit. So we've gone from a small team to a bit of a larger team. We've changed hands, so people are training, onboarding. So that's taken a toll on understanding what we're doing. The team that worked leading up to the Jonathan administration were sort of EIE's founding members. So they understood what we're doing, what we're trying to do. So we have a lot of new hands now. So it's taken me personally a bit more time in getting people up to speed. And I'll use Twitter, for example. For quite a bit of time, I managed EIE's Twitter account. And it was fun for me because I enjoy Twitter. It's a space I love. In the last 2 years, I've done very little on Twitter as Yemi with EIE's account, and new people are doing it. So the tone is different.
Absolutely.
The approach is different. So those are the kinds of things that people see and say, these people are not really as critical, and I'll take that.
But that doesn't mean you're in bed with the government.
No, we're not. And I think I actually like when PDP criticized us when they were in power, because they said we were APC's appendage. Now, PDP is saying, our APC is saying, you people, you are not, we thought you were on our side. Well, we're on the side of good governance. So if you're delivering it, you get kudos. If you're not, you get flagged for it.
How do you think the 2019 elections will be won?
Will be won. It'll be won via WhatsApp. I say that jokingly, but I say that to say it will be won by a lot of misinformation if we're not careful. Because, and I'm sure we see it all the time, people just send information and said, as received, copied, with no thought, with no verification, with no even trying to see if this makes any sense. Now, if people are that willing to share information and spread news that have either maybe 1% of truth or 10% of truth, we're in trouble. But with the number of aspirants that have thrown their hats in the game, I think it will be fun in terms of modeling up that that risk of fake news, if I want to put it that way, because it's in their own interest for there to be truth. So if they do the work in their own selfish interest, we might be able to get away with it, but it's really going to be actively citizens paying attention and actually engaging their brains. But unfortunately, where we are now with both ethnic and religious divisions, there are a lot of biases that have come to the fore. So when you layer certain types of information on already existing sentiments, it's very easy to add 2 + 2 and get 20.
Do you have confidence in the Professor Mahmood-led Independent National Electoral Commission to deliver in 2019?
I worry about them, and it's quite honest. I respect Professor Yakubu a lot. I think he means well. I think he's been extremely receptive to feedback from civil society, and I'll say from myself and EIE. But the CVR process and INEC's response to citizens' challenges gives me cause for worry in terms of electoral process. Because we're not under pressure. It's not timed in the sense of an election day. You have time. You can go and register today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, doesn't matter. But people are consistently talking about being asked to pay money, INEC staff not having materials to do their work, and INEC staff not really caring about what happens. So you get there, nobody is there to tell you, are you here to register? Do you want to move your registration? Did you lose your card? There's no clarity around what am I doing, where do I go, no direction. So I worry that this, as an indication of where INEC staff's psyche is very worrisome for me. And we're now in May. May is when they're going to distribute those who registered last year. So it'll be interesting to see how that process is executed. But I really think they need help. I know their budget is rubbish, and I understand that perfectly well. And that's also part of why they're doing local government registration rather than polling unit, because 774 local governments, it's cheaper to manage. And even at that, I think the calculation came to like 200 naira per day or something funny like that. So they don't have the money, but there are citizens groups willing to help. They have the support of development partners. So it's in your interest to itemize what you need and saying, look, this is where we're having challenges, and this is where I think you can help. This is where I think you can help. For example, one of the things I've been advocating to INEC for even under Professor Jega's, I don't want to call administration, if I call it that word, was working with telcos. INEC should not be paying commercial rates for certain things, from media space to even partnering with telcos in sending information.
Corporate social responsibility.
That's it. As part of your registration process, you give your phone number. So why can't INEC send me an SMS to give me information? Why is that a problem? Why is that hard? They'll tell me a cost. I'll say, fine. Get all the heads of the 4 telcos in a room and say, please, we need help. So even if you're charging 5 naira for an SMS, can you charge us 50 kobo? Can you charge us 1 naira? So it's like we pay something, yes, but we can't afford to pay at this rate to do what we need to do. So lay your cards on the table. But trying to do everything while you're having challenges, for me, is problematic.
The body language of the Inspector General of the Police, assuming he is staying to conduct the 2019 election, do you have confidence in the police to deliver?
Absolutely not. His body language is basically saying, I don't give a damn. That's what I read from it. And basically saying, I'm untouchable. So if your IG of police says he's untouchable and he's playing politics with lives in 2018, 2019 is quite disturbing.
What is your take on the current, I don't know if I should call it Dino Melaye crisis or saga or, Yahaya Bello, Dino Melaye. What's your take?
I think it's okay. I mean, as we see in Kaduna as well, Shehu Sani and El-Rufai don't get along. So it's not, and then Rivers of recent. So it's not exactly. It's not peculiar to Yahaya Bello and Dino Melaye. But I think the police handling of it allows you to make a mockery of what the issue is. If Dino Melaye was accused of providing guns, then prosecute him properly. But apparently the police were taking him to Kogi to actually answer questions. He got his lawyers to cross the police, and then he didn't jump out of a moving car. They stopped the police and they then rolled off, then said he broke his leg. I mean, so the theatrics around that and the response to that, for me, and the fact that the National Assembly is actually supporting is actually very disturbing. So you have a member of the National Assembly who's playing to the gallery around a case he doesn't want to go to Kogi for, which is, he can not want to go. But if you are violating the law and you are meant to go, then you should go. But supporting him by saying that he jumped out of a car and he was gassed, which is all not true, then begs the question, really, what are we after? Now, the real court process, people tend to conflate the issues, but I think they're very separate issues. Now, the terms of the recall might have been instigated by Mr. Bello. I don't know that for a fact. But people signed a petition. It was submitted to INEC, and INEC has a constitutional right to follow a process. Mr. Melaye tried to stop it in the court. It was unsuccessful. And when he went through the process, because his claim was simple, there were dead people who signed this petition. There were people who were not aware, whose names were in the book, which is fair. But the process has that ingrained in it.
What do you make of the failed process of his recall?
It just means that either the people were coerced, which was his claim from the very beginning, or they got scared, or the process, they just thought they couldn't be bothered to go through with the process. But that is the essence of a recall process. Yes, you signed the petition, but the verification is what INEC needs to do, because it's not INEC. Some people are saying that why didn't INEC pay attention to the list and call it out? That's not INEC's role. INEC cannot be judge and jury. You can't give them a petition and then want them to be the ones who sit down and on their own say that, this looks dodgy. No.
Does this serve as a good case study for recall processes in future?
It's yes and no. Yes, in the sense that for a lot of Nigerians, they didn't even realize it was possible. So for the awareness that it raised that citizens do not have to wait for 4 years to then vote a legislator out, but you can actually recall them within that 4 years, I think the answer is yes. No, in the sense that it was unsuccessful, because people might now think, oh, maybe not. But what's, I think, for me, very important around that is the proposed constitutional amendment around it. Now, the way the Constitution stands is that you need 50 plus 1, in a sense, of people who signed the petition, to sign a petition to recall a senator. But when you have 30% voter turnout, asking for 50 plus 1 is asking for a high bar. So the constitutional amendment is saying that it should be those who participated in the election who then have the opportunity to recall the legislator.
EIE published a guide to recall processes. I think that's a fantastic job there. But do you think it was a wise use of public funds, 100 million naira?
Well, to be honest, you can debate a lot of things as a wise use of funds, but the Constitution allows citizens to do it. What would you have the INEC do? Not do it?
So it was better it was done.
It had to be done. The Constitution allows citizens to do it. So INEC gets a petition. So unfortunately, and that was part of our challenge with it, the delay and start process probably ended up costing a lot more than the verification process in an itself. They used youth corpers who were already in the state and some INEC staff. So the actual manpower cost, I don't think will be that much. But when you start a process in July, and Dino Melaye went to court 3 or 4 times, and INEC had to keep going to court, start, stop, that is expensive.
The political elites, I feel like they're growing numb about protest in the country. And I know Enough is Enough Nigeria started off as a very vibrant organization that started protest and whatnot. And that's sort of like the base for EIE. Do you feel worried that the integrity of protests, I mean, you see skirmishes of protests across the country and everybody like, oh, this is paid, that one is paid, this one is paid. How does that make you feel?
But it's all, I actually don't think too much of it, to be honest. I mean, and I'll use the One Voice protest, for example, as an example. So last year, we were going to have Two-Face found himself in the midst of a call for a protest. And we partnered with the Tubaba Foundation to host the protest last year. At the last minute, Two-Face pulled out because there were security threats. And he made a call that, look, I do not want any loss of life because I was involved in this, so I will pull out. So that no lives will be lost. Because, I mean, there were some threats of people who were not affiliated but using his name to organize protests across the country. But we went ahead with it. But people were upset and did not come because Two-Face did not come. And my question was, Two-Face, for the most part, is comfortable. So if you have grievances against this government, should it matter if Two-Face comes out or not? And for me, that's really where the question should be. So yes, people can pay for people to show up. I mean, when I found out the protest market, I was quite shocked. They will ask you, do you want women, men? Do you want old women, young women? So you can pick and choose your market for who you want to show up at the protest. I find it fascinating. But ultimately, protest is a tool for citizens to amplify their concerns. So if you're content with tweeting and commenting on Facebook as your protest, I have no grudges. But for people who get tired and want to physically then express their dissatisfaction, by all means, we would always organize protests if the need arises for it, as well as do other things.
Last question to let you go. Has any politician, political party, politically exposed person funded Enough is Enough Nigeria?
Has anyone? Politician, yes. They've donated money, and I'll use Ekiti as an example. So 4 years ago, we had a concert in Ekiti. And part of it was for it to be a kumbaya type of concert. So we asked all 4 leading parties at the time to contribute money, and they did.
Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, because it was a concert around, it was one of our RSVP concerts. So the idea was register to vote,
Right.
get your PVC and come to the concert for free. Because it was funded by all 4 parties and all of their logos were on the banner, and so it wasn't...
so if anyone was to be influencing activities of EI, it has to be all 4 parties?
Exactly, it has to, across board. But we did that in Ekiti because the atmosphere allowed for it. But generally, it's a policy that we don't. But I use that as an example, but because we made sure it was all parties.
Thank you very much for your time.